Okay, so today is Java 3 Lesson 6, and today we're learning about lists. Array lists. So this is one of the types of lists, and array list is an array that can shrink and grow in size, unlike arrays. So remember when I told you before that arrays, they can't change their size. So whatever you set it as, or however many elements you put in it, you can't change it anymore. It has to stay like that for that array. But array lists, they're kind of like arrays in the way that they can store data. But this type of array, can shrink and grow in size. So note, you have to import java.util and then dot asterisks and semicolon to be able to use an array list. And I'm not going to go over it since you guys should be pretty familiar with it already. So to create an array list, you do something like this. So you see here that we have the name array list here. And then in curly brackets, not curly brackets, sorry, angle brackets, we have a wrapper class here. So the reason why we went over wrapper classes last class was because it's to be used for this. So you note here that these have to be wrapper classes instead of like primitive data types. So just remember that whatever value you want to use here, you have to use a wrapper class instead of one of the regular names. And then you have the name here of the array list that you want to name it as. Equals new array list, and then in here you have in angle brackets the wrapper class that you want to use again, and then parentheses semicolon. So it's similar to how you create objects in the way that you use new. So that's a point of similarity there. And basically you're just repeating what you have here over here. So again, in between the angle brackets is where you put the data type of the elements you'll be putting in the array list. Initialization of an array list creates an empty array list through the array list constructor. So picture array list as an object, like a class in this way. So it has a constructor. So you're basically creating an empty array list through the array list constructor. And the type inside the pointy brackets can't be primitive data types, so it has to be wrapper classes. So that's one difference between array lists and arrays, and the fact that you don't create, you're not allowed to like create it when you initialize it. You add elements later on, and I'll show how to do that in a second. So more information before we go on to what you can do with array lists. So if you were to create an array list of object, so basically if you want to create array list of objects, you wouldn't use pointy brackets as in something like this. So this is just a note if you ever wanted to create an array list of objects. Yeah, but just note that you don't have pointy brackets here, and you just have the array list, ARR equals new array list, and parentheses, semicolon. So you can create both an array of array lists, and just note that on the right side of that, the array list doesn't include the pointy brackets, and an array list of arrays. You can also create an array list of arrays as, that is repeated, no, joke, sorry. Yeah, you can also create an array list of array lists as well as an array list of strings. So basically it can contain any type of value, except you just have to make the necessary adjustments for that, such as if you were trying to do a primitive data type, you have to change, put like wrapper class inside of it. And if you're doing an object, you don't include pointy brackets and so on. So array list methods. So since we're talking about array list being a class, then of course it has its methods. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a very useful class. So there are some methods for array lists, and E in these following examples just mean the general type of the array list, which is whatever type of data the array list holds. These methods were gotten, that's incorrect grammar, but whatever, were got from the Java library. So you can take a look on there as well for more methods and also any clarifications. But yeah, I just copy and pasted it. So And you would find it on there as well, but I'm just making it here so that it's easier to access. So first one you have is int size, and this int represents like what data type it would return. So basically just kind of disregard this, but this is the name of the method. So this is what you would use to actually do the method. And what this does is it returns the number of elements in the array list. And so this is similar to the dot length for strings and arrays that we saw before. So except that it has a different name. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as the other ones. Next one we have is Boolean add. And then in here, we have an E object. So this is saying that the name is add. And this object in here, well, this is the name of the object. This is the whatever type your array list contains. And so what this is saying that for this add method, you have to have a parameter of whatever type your value, like your array list contains, a name of the object, and then this adds object, so this here, to the array list, and returns true if it added. So this is what this Boolean means. It's just returning a Boolean. Here we have get, int, index. And so you'll get familiar with this type of writing. So it's just saying that the name is get, and the parameter is an integer, index, and then it returns whatever like whatever value it is that the array list contains at this index. So basically it returns the element at index IDX. So this is similar to like the get methods we were talking about in classes before. It just basically gets the element at a certain index that you input. So next one, set. I'm not going to go over it too much, but you can see here that we have two elements as the parameters. And this sets the element at index IDX to element and returns the element that was previously at that location. Void add int IDX E element, it inserts element at index IDX. So you can see here that we have two add methods here. So they're made different by these. So again, like we said before, you can't have two methods with the same name unless you make the parameters different. So in this case, these two methods are allowed. Array list methods continued. So more methods. First one, remove. Like it says, it removes and returns the index, the element at index IDX, and shifts all the elements after it to the left. Next one, another remove method, but just note that they have different values as parameters. And this removes the first element with the value from the list if it exists, and return whether the deletion was successful or not. ToString returns a string. You guys should be familiar with it from talking about like inheritance and the class methods and stuff. Boolean contains object O. This returns whether or not the list contains an object with a value of O. And this is compared using the equals method. Example of some methods. I'm not going to put all the examples of the methods since you'll get the idea of how to use them after like a few examples. As long as you follow whatever the methods require. So like in terms of parameters, then I think you'll be fine. So you can see here that we create a new array list here, and it's split on two lines since I don't have enough room in the text box. But you can see here that we have an array list named A equals new array list integer. So this is saying that the array list contains integers. You can see here that we use one of the methods, the add methods. So first you put the array list name dot add, and then in here you put the value you want to add. And in this case, if you remember, this add method also returns a Boolean that says whether or not it was added. But you actually don't have to actually print it out unless you wanted to. But usually people don't really print it out. just adding would be fine. So see, okay, so first it adds an integer 2 to the array list. Then next we have a.add 10. So this adds 10 to the array list. This one adds 5 to the array list, and this one adds 7 to the array list. So now if you printed the array list out, you would see that it contains 2, 10, 5, and 7. So in this next line, we print out a.size. If you remember, .size means that you're returning basically the length of array list. And in this case, it would print out 4, since you have 4 values, 2, 10, 5, and 7. So it would print out 4, which is why you see 4 here. A.remove 1. So in this case, this dot remove is signifying that it removes the first index. So whatever's at the first index. So if you look at here, 2, 10, 5, 7, this is the first index. So it deletes this. So the thing that would be left is 2, 5, and 7. This next one, a.set. Remember, it takes 2 parameters. One is the index it wants to remove and the value it's going to set it to. So it's saying that we're going to take the 0 index and set it to 23. So if you remember, the array list right now is 2, 5, 7. And we're taking the 0 index and we're setting it to 23. So then it'd be 23, 5, 7. And then we print out array list, which is possible here, since that's another difference of printing array list that is different from arrays. And I'll go over a little bit more about that in a second. But it's possible to do something like this where you put the name of the array list inside a print statement. And so what our output is 23, 5, 7 in square brackets. So this would be the output of this. So linked list. So linked list is another type of list, and this list has a bunch of nodes that link together to form a list. So it performs the same things as an array list, and when creating one, you just replace array list and array list with the words linked list. So by nodes, I mean that they're all linked together. So it's kind of like a line of chains. So in that way, they're all linked together so that each piece of information is all linked together in a list. Array list, it doesn't really work like that. It works more like an array. So that's the difference between these two. So array list is used much more than linked list since array lists are more efficient at finding elements at a certain index. So the methods for array lists previously can also be used for linked lists, though since they operate differently, the efficiency for each method differs. So a few examples of what I mean by that is, so array list functions on like a more separated kind of organized in a way. So that if you're going to find an index, it's very easy to locate that index and give the value. But if you're talking about linked list would have to go along the line of chains to get to that value and print it out. So because it has to go like a more indirect way, while array list goes more direct, array list is more efficient in that way than linked list. And same thing if you had to add something, I think it'd be better to talk about remove. If you're to remove something for array list, it's easy to go locate that value and just like take it off the list. But with linked list, you'd have to like go through the chains, and then you'd have to remove the chain and then find a way to attach the other chains to the rest of the chain, which could also take some time, which is why array list is more efficient at that as well. So those are just a few examples, and you can think of more. There's also runtime tables on it, so on the internet, so you can find those to find out more specifically how it works. But yeah, those are just a few examples of how like the efficiency differs. So this last part is about printing list out. So when you print out a list, you don't actually have to run a loop to get the values. So with these, you can actually just put the name of the list into a print statement, and it will print the values of the list in between square brackets as shown previously. So that's another way that array lists and lists in general differ from arrays, in the fact that for array lists, you have to actually go through it and print it out in a loop. But with array lists and linked lists, then you can actually just put the name of the list into a print statement, and I'll just print out like normal. And yeah, that would be it for this lesson. It's a long lesson, but it's kind of complicated in a way, but it's pretty important for data collection in the future. So it's an important lesson nonetheless. But otherwise, I will be putting the class problems up in a second. All right, so these are the class problems for today. And so these top problems are the regular problems, and these are the challenge problems. Do the regular problems first before you do the challenge problems. Otherwise, yeah. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, you can leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, that'd be it for this lesson then.